Hello, this is episode 10 of the Martial Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Jacobs. I'm a martial artist, martial arts journalist, a former contributing editor to Black Belt Magazine, and I tell stories about martial arts. So we've got the Olympics coming up in a few days, and of course, judo is included on the schedule of events. Our guest today, Gary Goltz, is a respected judo coach, judo writer, and a former president of the United States Judo Association. He was a colleague at Black Belt Magazine, who's here now to tell everyone why they should be tuning into Olympic judo. Gary, how are you?
I'm terrific. Good to talk to you, Mark.
Good to talk to you. So, some background first. You're originally from Pittsburgh and you got started in judo as a little kid there way back in the 1960s, right?
1965. I was 10 and a half years old.
What got you interested in doing judo to begin with?
Well, I wasn't good at sports, and I watched the Green Hornet and saw Cato kicking everyone's butt, and thought to myself, that would be pretty neat to know one of those martial arts. They didn't even call them martial arts back then. I forget what they were called. Anyhow, so I talked to one of my friends, and he told me he was enrolled in a judo class at the Jewish Y in Pittsburgh. And I said, "Well, I'm going to go with you." And he said, "Yeah, come on."
Nope.
So we went to the Jewish Y, and it was a Saturday afternoon class. And we were actually at the second class. We missed the first one. And we're talking to a couple kids up in the mezzanine where they had the mats and the boxing area. And we're looking down at the gym, and they said, "Oh, there's the instructor." And I looked from up on the perch I was at down at the gym, and I saw this huge guy just walking across the gym floor with the grace and ease. And he kind of looked like Bruce Lee, only he was like 6'2", and he was very, very formidable looking and very friendly. And then when he got up to the mezzanine, he had to duck to get under the doorway. That's how tall he was. And that's where I met Kyu Ha Kim, Mr. Kim, my beloved instructor, who was the two-time heavyweight Korean champion in the late 50s and somehow managed to settle in Pittsburgh.
And since then, you became a judo coach, a writer, and you eventually became president of the U.S. Judo Association, which is one of the two main governing bodies for judo in
Well, there's
America.
actually there's actually three
Oh,
governing
there's
bodies.
three?
Yes, just to clarify,
Uh,
there's the USJF, which has been around forever, and then the USJA, which was part of the USJF, and in the mid to late 60s, they had a falling out, and they both became independent groups. And then when the Olympics really took seed, the act that runs the Olympic sports created national governing bodies, NGBs. And because there were two organizations and they couldn't pick one over the other, they created a third one that was supposed to be the neutral body that would work with the USJF and work with the USJA. But over the years, that neutral body has become a entity unto itself. We used to have an alliance agreement where all three organizations cooperated really well with each other. But about a year and a half ago, that alliance agreement was put in the tank, and now USA Judo is indeed its own third organization competing directly with USJA
ah,
and USJF, and they have a built-in advantage because they're the ones that control the Olympics,
right.
and
Yeah,
they're
I was
also the ones.
aware. I'm sorry, I was aware of them, but I had always thought of them as just having, to do with the Olympic movement and the USJF, USJA as the two main governing bodies. But I guess, yeah, I understand what you're saying, that they're now their own thing. And I guess everybody wants to be part of that if you want to go to the Olympics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And a lot of the big tournaments are all sanctioned by USA Judo. So it's the judo in this country right now is in a state of being reformed, and it's still not clear how it's going to turn out. The USJF has pretty much stayed to itself. I mean, if you look at the history of that organization, it has a lot of Nisei and Sansei members. So, it's very Japanese in its orientation, very traditional. The USJA was the Armed Forces Judo Association, and a lot of the people in the USJA are more the red-blooded American types that came out of the service. And USA Judo, the national governing body, is basically tied to the USOPC in Colorado Springs,
Mhm.
and so that's where judo is right now. It's an interesting state.
Does
This
that does that retard the growth of the sport in the U.S. that you have those competing governing bodies?
What doesn't help the sport, I can tell you that much. I mean, it's confusing,
Mm.
because when you want to, like I used to do local tournaments at my own dojo at the Claremont Community Center. And now, if I want to get a sanction, I got to decide, well, if I want a lot of people to come, I got to go with USA Judo, but a lot of my people are members of USJA, and a lot of the people in the local area are members of USJF because of the local Yadanshikai, which is a black belt association. They've been affiliated with USJF. It's called NANCA, which is the one that covers Southern California. So it's become a challenge for me to be able to put together a tournament and invite everyone, because now I got to deal with, well, how am I going to get the JA players to come? How am I going to get the JF players to come? If I make it USA Judo, I'll get a lot of serious competitors, but the grassroots players, they tend to be members of the
Uh,
JA and tend to be members of the JF. So I think
too
you're getting
much
a picture.
politics. Too much politics. Too many
Oh,
people
tell
wanting
me
to be
about it,
chiefs
Mark.
and no Indians.
I'm telling you, judo politics have been prevalent in the sport since I started in
Right.
1965.
Now, people don't may not realize that are listening, younger listeners, that when you got involved in judo back in the 1960s, that was probably the most popular Asian martial art
Oh,
in the United
well,
States and probably around the world back then, wasn't it?
well, go back to my story. I watched the Green Hornet and saw Kato. Talked to one of my friends who was this kind of nerdy guy that read all the books, comic books. He already knew about judo. To me, they all were the same. And he knew judo was an Olympic sport, and he knew it was number one, and he knew there was this class at the Jewish Y. So, when I decided to do martial arts, I was drawn to judo because it was the predominant martial art. There was no other place to go at that time.
So what happened? How did it lose so much popularity in the US anyway? I know other martial arts emerged here that became more popular, but those other arts are in Europe and Asian countries, but judo is still pretty popular there, but not
Well,
so much here anymore. Why is that?
you know, really, at one point, USJA had probably 10,000 members. USJF probably had 10,000 members, and USA Judo had probably 10,000 members. So you're talking 30,000 registered judo members.
Hmm.
And now JA is probably in the 4 to 5,000 range. JF is in the 6 to 8,000 range. USA Judo's about the majority, maybe about 12,000. This is my guesstimate. And then you got to consider the fact that some people like me are members of all three, so you can't count them. You can't count them 2 or 3 times. But the bottom line is, we're lucky if we have 20 some thousand judo people registered in this country right now. And when I started judo, I'm sure the numbers were probably pushing 50,000, maybe even more, maybe as high as 100,000.
And that's a much smaller overall population. So percentage wise, there are far fewer people doing judo now than there used to be.
And BJJ has really taken a lot of the people that would have been judo people, and they become card carrying BJJ people. And one of the things we joke about is that, when you really look at BJJ and the fact that it was started by Miyano, he went to
Maida. Yeah.
Brazil, he spread the judo, and he taught the Gracies. I mean, they take this as an insult, but it's true. BJJ is basically just judo.
So is it marketing? How did the BJJ, at least in the United States, overtake judo and become so much
Oh,
more
and you
popular?
know what? I'm glad you asked me that question. I got a lot of thoughts on it. Well, I think it started with the UFC. I
Hmm.
mean, the Hoist and Horian are the ones that started it,
Right.
and they visited some judo dojos right here in Southern California, and they did almost the exact thing they talk about. They got on the mat with the judo people and started to do like sparring, randori, whatever you want to call it,
Hmm.
competition, and they pulled them to the ground. And
Right.
when it came to the groundwork, a lot of times the BJJ people were much more adept at ways to entangle you on the
Right.
ground, and this translated to superiority in their mind.
Yeah,
You know,
I've heard that, going back over 100 years, that's what was happening in Japan, that there was the section of judo, the subsection that I think they called it Kosen judo that
yes,
specialized in the groundwork, and they were beating all the judo guys, and a lot of the traditional judo guys that did more standing were upset by that, and they ended up changing the rules so it was much more oriented towards standing wrestling than ground wrestling.
that's spot on. What happened was, Kano studied all these different Japanese traditional jujitsu styles, and Kano loved the throws.
Hmm.
He was very much attracted to the throws, and judo at around the turn of the last century, he invented it in 1882, and in about the 1900s, these Kosen people were coming to the Kodokan, the school that Kano founded, and they were doing exactly what the Gracies did when they visited several of the traditional judo clubs like Tenere around here. And Kano is probably one of the smartest people that's ever been born to Earth. I mean, he's not a mystic, very down to earth educator, and he formed judo like a college course with a syllabus. Here's the throwing techniques, here's the ground techniques, the pins, the strangles, the arm locks, and then he broke them down into categories. Then he staggered them by skill level. Then he came up with the belt system and was the first to come up with the black belt, being the highest rank. But getting back to your question, the Kosen guys came to the Kodokan. They started pinning everyone, and that's when Kano put in all the mat holds, all the strangles, all the arm bars. Kano was an adapter. I mean, if he had his choice, Funakoshi from karate would have been part of Kodokan Judo. Ushiba from Aikido, he would have been part of Kodokan Judo. He was always looking to broaden the art, and he was always looking to take in other people and expand. He was not a closed-minded individual, and he did. And Kano is revered in Japan as like the biggest proponent for the Olympics. But believe it or not, he did not see judo as an Olympic sport, and he never set out to make judo an Olympic sport, even though he was the key ambassador from Japan to bring judo to Japan. In fact, if you look at the picture of Jesse Owens when he won his gold medal in Germany and surprised all those Nazis by being a black guy from America to win the gold medal. If you look closely at that picture of him getting his gold medal, on the left hand, I think it's the right hand side, you see Dr. Kano standing there
Well, that's
in the
interesting. I
picture.
didn't know that. So we got the Olympics coming up now. Now we're talking Olympics. The judo competition starts this weekend, just a few days after we're recording this. And I'll admit, I'm not the biggest fan of the Olympics. The politics, the cheating, the biased judging all tend to turn me off to a lot of the Olympics. But do you think the Olympics are a good thing for judo?
I think the Olympics, I had this conversation a couple of days ago with Keith Bryant, who's the CEO of USA Judo, the
Hmm.
NGB that governs judo. And we were talking, and he was saying how they wish they could get more Olympians and whether Olympics are good for judo. And I'm going to tell you exactly what I told him. To me, judo is a philosophy, an approach to life that gave me confidence, that gave me the ability to fail and to get back up on the horse and try again, and gave me the ability to be assertive, and gave me the ability to ask a girl out on a date and not worry if she said no to me, because that's just like losing in a tournament. You're going to get back up the next day and there's another girl you're going to ask. So to me, what I'm teaching when I teach judo, I'm teaching people fundamentals of how to make their life better because they learn skills that allow them to try things, allow them to fail, allow them to experiment, allow them to get a taste of what it's like to win, and more importantly, get a taste of what it's like to lose. And these are skills that make you a better character, the ultimate goal of judo, according to Kano. And this is what is important to me. Now, where does the Olympics come in? And this is the conversation I was having with Keith Bryant, who's a good guy. And I said to him, if you have a Kobe Bryant of judo, just like in basketball, how many kids play basketball in this country because they want to be Kobe Bryant?
Hmm. A
You see
lot
what
of,
I'm saying?
yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So that's where the Olympics help judo because, Kano's goal was to make better people. And if the Olympics is a huge billboard advertising judo and people get excited about an Olympian like Teddy Riner from France or in our country, let's look at Rhonda. I
Hmm.
mean, she's probably one of the biggest names that ever came out of American judo. She made it in Hollywood and she made it in the UFC. And, she helped put judo on the map. And so, I mean, there's where the connection between the Olympics and the philosophy of judo match up because anything that gets people to want to do judo, how many of them are really going to end up in the Olympics?
Yeah.
0.001%, maybe if you're lucky or
Hmm.
that. But how many of them are going to, because of judo, learn not to be a jerk and learn how to be a good person and learn how to work with other people and learn how to take criticism and learn how to fall down and get up. In fact, one of our famous sayings in judo is the Zen saying, fall down 7 times, get up 8. So this is, from me being a judo purist, I love the Olympics. I love Ronda Rousey because all these things do is get regular people who aren't going to be the Olympian to come to judo and try judo. That's how I see it. It's
Yeah.
free advertising.
Now, regarding the Olympics, what do you think of America's chances of winning a medal? I think we're only sending 4 athletes over there
Yeah,
to
we have
compete.
we have 2 men and 2 women,
Yeah.
and Delgado, who's from Florida. I've met her, Angelica, very nice woman. She trains at Kitsutsu Sai, which is a big club in the Miami area. She's going for her third, I think, third time, and very very experienced. Cuba, they love judo down there. I visited Cuba about 13 years ago. The guy who helped me build my club is from Cuba. And we went and visited Cuba. We went to the National Training Center. We met the big coach that recently passed away, Viatia, and their women's team is renowned.
Yeah.
And so, Delgado is a good person to be in this, and she'll be doing it for the third time. Right behind her is Maria Lombardi, and she's from Kenosha, Wisconsin, and she's also training at Kitsutsu Sai down in Florida. So they're working together. And Angelica is 52. kilos, and Maria is 48. So those are our two women. And the two guys, you got a guy named John Jane, who I just was watching a video. He's coming out of Chicago, and I assumed he was coming from my good friend Steve Cohn and his son's dojo out there. But what I came to realize is that he actually started judo at the Budokan in London. Judo's huge over there.
Hmm.
And then he eventually moved to the Chicago area. And he's the 90 kilo entry for us. And he's born in Great Britain. And then lastly, you got Jack Yonazuka. His dad was a renowned, actually, his grandfather was a renowned judo guy.
Yeah, he's got quite a lineage. I think his
Well,
grandfather and his father were
let me
both.
tell you, his grandfather Yanni came over at the same time as my instructor, Mr. Kim from Japan, and they both were going to work for this guy in New York. And Mr. Kim stopped in Pittsburgh to do a clinic, and they loved him, and he liked Pittsburgh because of the mountains and the snow. It reminded him of Korea, and they were able to get him out of the contract with the same guy who brought Yanni into New York. So there's a parallel between Jack's grandfather and my instructor Kyu Ha Kim. And I'm so glad to see Jack, third generation judoka, uh, on the team. And by the
I
way,
know he had a great junior career. Do you think he has a chance to medal over there?
of course he does.
Yeah.
I mean, when the Americans take a medal, it comes out of left field. Because we don't have the judo infrastructure that they have in France, or they have in
Right.
South Korea, or they have obviously in Japan or in Russia, or these countries where judo is huge. But occasionally, somebody comes along like a Jason Morris. I mean, at the first Olympics, Jim Bregman took a bronze medal, and it's a real triumph when that happens for America.
Right.
And to see somebody like Kayla take one in London and another one in Rio, that's like
Yeah.
that's like a story like Mary Lou Retton.
So,
It's like
so what about the rest of the world? Who are the players from around the world to keep an eye on? I know Japan, they were down for a while internationally, but dominated at the last Olympics on their home court in Tokyo. This is in France, and the French usually have a strong judo team. Can we expect them to dominate
well, they
here?
got Teddy Ranier,
Hmm.
who's won 11 world titles and three Olympic gold medals.
Yeah, I know that's probably the big story of these Olympic judo competitions that he's tied the record for three gold medals and he'll be going for an all-time record fourth gold medal at home in France. He's, I think, 35, which is kind of up there in years for a judo player. Can he win that fourth gold and set the
And
record?
that's what people are debating right now. Is he too old? Should he have retired? It's gonna
Well, what do you think? Give us the prediction here.
well, you know what? I'd never take anything away from Teddy Ranier. He's the Shaq of judo in France.
Hmm.
He's a big guy, and I wouldn't be surprised if he pulls off the fourth one.
Who do you think wins the overall team title? Does France do it at home or Japan repeat from the
Well,
last Olympics?
let's talk about that. There's 15 medals at stake.
Hmm.
There's seven for men with the different weight classes, and there's seven for women. Then there's what they created a few Olympics back, the mixed competition, which is
Right.
the team. So, I mean, it obviously comes down to the countries that have always been the leaders in judo. And I can tell you, in France, judo is like number one. It's like the top sport in France. This guy, Teddy Ranier, if he walked into an airport, he'd get mobbed like Kobe would have gotten mobbed at LAX. I'm telling
If he wins that fourth gold medal, would you rate him as the greatest judo player ever then?
you, probably in the Olympics, I would have to say. But
Yeah.
I mean, when you really look at who the greatest judo player ever was, you couldn't stop without mentioning Kano as the greatest judo
Mm.
player ever. He invented it.
Yeah. And then there's Masahiko Kimura, who was
Yeah,
dominating for
Kimura. Then you
years
got
before there were Olympics.
you got all the great Miata. You got everyone that's ever followed
Right.
Kano, all the 10th Dons. I mean, you got a lot of history
But it'll
there.
be tough to argue with 4 gold medals.
No,
That's
no, definitely.
in any sport,
Definitely.
that's a phenomenal run.
Yeah, he
Um,
has a teammate, Clarice, and I'm
yeah,
gonna botch your last name. I was
I,
not. I took French for 2 years,
I know
but
who you're talking about. She's the women's defending gold medalist, I
right,
believe.
right. She's on the women's side from France,
Yeah.
and then you got Hufumi and Abi from Japan. They're contenders. Then Kosovo has a couple strong contenders. Nora, again, I'm going to mispronounce her name, and Destraya. They moved up a weight category, and Kosovo has 3 Olympic gold medals, all from women in judo.
Yeah, it'll certainly be an interesting competition. So what do you think then is the future of judo in America and around the world for that matter? Do you see judo expanding more, or has it plateaued in America and it's never going to return to what it was?
I'm too much of an optimist to ever adopt that kind of attitude. I think that somewhere along the line we're going to get judo smart in this country.
It's
I think.
certainly an exciting sport to watch when done well, when you see some of the big throws, the high elevation
Well,
hip throws and leg reap throws. It becomes very exciting.
let's talk about that because I thought that I wanted to mention when we were talking about BJJ. Why is BJJ so popular? One of the reasons I hate to say it is because they don't throw people like we do, and throwing is intimidating. We teach people how to fall, and you take good falls in judo. But let's face it, when it comes right down to it, of all the martial arts, in my opinion, judo is the football of the martial arts. I mean, we're the most knocked down for
Oh yeah,
real.
it's
And,
certainly grueling on the body,
and
but
trust me, 2 knee operations on my left, one on my right, collarbone, both ankles, concussion, you name it, I've had it.
but
So I
from a
mean,
spectator viewpoint, it's spectacular to watch when you do see those kind of big throws.
and what I'm seeing now in my dojo, I get a lot of BJJ people that have done BJJ, even gone to their black belts, and they're yearning for more, and they're
Mhm.
attracted to the throws of judo. If you go to a BJJ tournament, for instance, let's say you got a judo person entering a BJJ tournament, and there's 10 mats going on, and all of a sudden there's a Ponzianagi or one arm shoulder throw on mat number 4. People in the place go nuts.
Mhm.
They all stand up. Did you see that? I mean, it's like there's nothing more spectacular than seeing somebody get ippon thrown
Sure.
in
Well,
judo.
if you want to see that, I guess you tune into the Olympics and you'll see some of those big ippon throws there. Gary, thank you very much for coming on the show and enlightening us all about the state of judo. If people want to learn more about you, connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Go to my website, goltzjudo.com. Goltz for those who don't know how to spell my last name.
All right. I recommend people go if they want to learn more about you, learn more about judo. I'll put a link to the site down in the show notes, and I want to thank you again for being on the show today.
Hey, I had a great time. And if they want to circumvent going to my website, they can also just look up Jack Black Tiger Roll, which has gone viral. Me taking him on Conan. It's funnier than all hell.
Yeah, I've heard about that. So people should check that out as well. All
Be
right.
sure. I had a
Thank
good
you.
time.
Thank you
Thanks
again.
for the opportunity. I'd love to see judo get back to being number 1 in the U.S.
Okay. Good luck. Take care.
You take care, Mark. All the best.
Again, I want to thank Gary Goltz for being on the show. You can find a link to his website down in the show notes. Thanks, as always, to Eleanor Academia for providing the music to the show. You can find her website along with my own down in the show notes as well. Thank you for listening, and as that old sensei of mine used to say, keep punching.